1 week season.
Hello, friends and Inner Circle fam. Welcome back to the Week 2 edition of the OWS roster review stream. I'm your host, StatATL. This week, we'll be reviewing more than a dozen subscriber-submitted rosters, as well as my own and another fellow OWS contributor roster at the end. So let's hop in here with a single entry build from Inner Circle member, Joseph Hood. So Joseph starts this build, it's $100 single entry with 2,200 entrants. And it is a Daniel Jones skinny stack with Malik Neighbors, and brought it back with Brian Robinson. So it's going to be popular, but I like that you decided to play him differently by pairing him with Danny Dimes and running it back with a low-owned commander in Brian Robinson, who offered, great leverage off of the Jaden Daniels chalk. Roster also has a mini correlation with Cooper Kupp and Trey McBride. Again, playing a popular piece in Kupp, but pairing him with a 6% owned McBride, I really like that. You've also got J.K. Dobbins, Deebo Samuel, and Jalen McMillan here as one-offs. All guys that I really liked this past week, all made my player pool. But I think on this build, I'd rather see you play Jordan Naylor instead of McMillan to correlate with Deebo, since you're fading a 60% owned Jordan Mason on this build. I'd rather see you bet on this game being a back-and-forth affair. If San Francisco is curb stomping the Vikings, Mason is probably heavily involved too. And so since that's not the bet you're making on this roster, I'd rather see you go that direction with Jordan Naylor. You close it out with Pittsburgh D. I thought that was very sharp this week too, playing the Broncos with Bo Nix, making his second start. So I liked that build this week. Thank you for the submission. So the next roster comes from Inner Circle member GHeler. It is a $12 single entry with 19,000 entrants. As you see, it is a San Francisco and Minnesota game stack. A Brock Purdy double with both Deebo and Ayuk, and you brought it back to Jefferson. So I like that you took a popular game and played it differently, avoiding Mason, but you accounted for him by saying maybe the scores come through the air. So you played two San Francisco pass catchers. Had you gone with Kittle, or had Ayuk had Kittle's day of 20 some odd points, this could have worked out better for you, but I really liked the process. You then pulled another lever by playing Brian Robinson. Again, leverage off of the popular Jaden Daniels. I like that. The roster then features J.K. Dobbins as a one-off. I like that too. And it wrapped up with Shaheed and Schoonemaker as another mini correlation. Again, like betting that the touchdowns in Dallas didn't flow through CeeDee Lamb. So I like the 20,000 person contest. Pulled a couple of different levers, avoiding Mason, but accounting for him as a super popular play. And I think that this legit has a shot to win if things had broke differently. So nice job. Thank you for the submission this week. So the next roster comes from Air. And this is a $50 single entry with 2,300 entrants. It is a game stack of the Vikings and 49ers, a Vikings skinny stack with Darnold and Jefferson. And then you brought it back with Jordan Mason and Deebo. I really like this. So incorporating two really popular plays in both Jordan Mason and Deebo, but you supplemented it with Darnold and Jefferson. Not something that I did personally, as Sam Darnold didn't make my player pool, as I really like to keep my pool really tight. Talk about at the end, but I do like this construction. Unfortunately, no more correlation on this build outside of the San Francisco and Minnesota Vikings game. You've got Jahmyr Gibbs here as a one-off, betting on the highest game total of the week. I like it, but I'd rather see you pair him with Godwin or Evans instead of Amari Cooper on this build. And then final piece is Colby Parkinson. Allowed you to get inexpensive exposure to a popular game. I did like that. So DGen Air, thank you for this week. The next roster comes from Inner Circle member Baruz. It is an $8 3 max with 8,800 entrants. It is a Daniel Jones skinny stack with Malik Neighbors and Terry McLaurin as the bringback. You played a projected like Uber chalk in Brees and Kyron at running back, but you built around the Rams and the Cards differently with Kyron and Marvin Harrison Jr. So I did really like that. You've got Brock Bowers here as a one-off. And the Steelers D, again, playing rookie quarterback Bo Nix, who looked overmatched for the second straight week. So I did like that. I think this is a great example of playing some chalk, but building differently. So I thought this was also a really well-constructed lineup. Next build comes from Inner Circle member Berg25. It is a $27 single entry with 3,200 entrants in the contest. I was actually in this contest with you, Berg. I think I finished 40th. Won't be a roster review today because we're open to review my highest dollar single entry, no matter how it did, which this week, like most weeks, will be the $50 single entry. But back to Berg's build here. As you see, it's a Jaden Daniels naked build here with Malik Neighbors as a bringback. So I think in a contest this size, again, 3,200 entrants, I generally like to include a pass catcher, even with a mobile quarterback, because if Jaden Daniels is putting up a score that you had to have, a score that you need to beat thousands of entries, he's likely bringing along a pass catcher with him. And the Commanders have several low-owned, options that you could consider this week. So I think personally, I'd rather see you incorporate a commander on this build with Daniels. The roster then features Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, and James Conner from the Rams Cards game. I generally don't like to play expensive opposing running backs together. I don't mind it here since both of these teams are pretty concentrated offense. This was a high game total in the Vegas implied odds, and both Kyron and Connor are likely to see 20-plus opportunities. So I don't mind it, and I do like the correlation. The roster then also features a Deebo Samuel and Jordan Naylor mini correlation. Really like that. Personally, I played 23% Jordan Naylor this week, so I really like that play at super low ownership with Addison out. It's kind of one of those where you wanted to be, for me, I wanted to be early to the party on Jordan Naylor. And then the final piece of this roster is Luke Schoonmaker. If paying down, I think I'd rather see you go with Zach Ertz here to pay with Jaden Daniels, kind of allow you to kind of keep the same construction. But good build otherwise. And thank you for the submission. So the next roster comes from SK Larma. It is a $5 small field here with 475 entrants in this contest. It is a San Francisco double stack with Purdy, Mason, and Deebo. No bringback. A popular Brees Hall is a one-off I really liked in a contest this size. Same with Cooper Kupp. You've got Andre Ichovas, Zach Ertz, and Jahmyr Gibbs. I think they're all, fine plays. I'd much rather see you have some correlation and floor in a contest this size. So, instead of Gibbs, I'd rather see Rashee Rice or Isaiah Pacheco to correlate with Yoshi. Or maybe Malik Neighbors instead to correlate with Zach Ertz. So, when you're playing in a contest this size, like a really small field, keep in mind that you don't have to hit the nuts, as you're only competing against a few hundred rosters. And incorporating some floor into your build is really important too. But thank you for the submission this week, SK Lama. So the next build comes from BigBen, Big 10. It is a $5 single entry into the 12,000 entrant contest. As you see, it's Kyler Murray naked with both Kyren Williams and Cooper Kupp. Again, so like in a contest this size, where again you're competing with more than 10,000 entrants, I like to have a pass catcher, because if in this build particularly, because if Kyler is putting up a score that you had to have, again, a score to beat thousands of entrants, he's likely bringing a pass catcher with him. There are strong options on Arizona. They're a reasonably concentrated offense. So I know that some people they shy away from having to pick because they don't know who to pair him with. But with 12,000 entrants, someone is going to have the right stack, whether that be Marvin Harrison, whether that be Trey McBride, going to have the correct stack if it's the one that you had to have that explodes. So, play fearlessly and take a shot on who that stack is going to be. The roster then has Brandon Cooks and Rashid Shaheed as a mini correlation. So I like that. You played both chalk running backs in Jordan Mason and Breece Hall, both as one-offs. I don't mind that. And then your final piece was Jordan Atkins, which I thought was a viable punt play at tight end with Njoku out. So I think the main change that I'd make on this roster is either instead of Breece Hall or Atkins, I would have played Connor or McBride to pair with Kyren on this build, Kyren and Kupp. So I do really like that. Continuing with the correlation. So Big Ben, thank you for the submission this week. The next roster we're going to look at is from BPV338. It is a $12 single entry with 7,300 entrants. As you see, a Daniel Jones skinny stack with Malik Neighbors, no bring back. You played both Cooper and Williams without any Cardinal. So we spoke all week on OWS that this pair was viably played together due to that likelihood of like 40 to 50 opportunities, which is carries and targets. But at their price tag, I would have included a Arizona player. The roster also features both Jordan Mason and Debo, again without a Viking. So for those of you who have watched these shows last season, you know I'm a big proponent of correlation. So while you can do well without it, it's just more things or situations that have to go your way that you have to get right. So if Debo and Mason are both putting up really strong scores, it's likely that a Viking is having a decent game as well, since they're pretty correlated. They're pretty consolidated with their injuries to both Hawkinson and Addison. So the choices are kind of limited of who that's likely to be. You've got Chris Godwin here as a one-off. I thought that was strong. And just because he's doing well doesn't mean that any particular Lion is doing well, with just how many pieces they have this year between Amon-Ra St. Brown, Laporta, Williams, Montgomery, Gibbs, etc. All kind of higher, at least mid-priced or higher. So Chris Godwin in that Cooper Kupp role, I think was a really strong play as a one-off, and I really like that. And then your final piece here on this roster is I thought it was fine. It's getting leverage off Colby Parkinson, who obviously, since you're already betting on Kyren and Kupp, you don't really want on this roster, as well as CeeDee Lamb, who was very high owned as well. And again, featuring the Steelers D, I thought was very sharp. So BPV, thank you for the submission this week. So the next roster comes from Inner Circle member Johnny Apple 24. It is a $50 single entry in the 5,700 entrant contest. It is a Mahomes double stack, Kelsey and Xavier Worthy, and you brought it back with Chase Brown. So to me, in a contest this size, like I feel like Chase Brown is a little thin as a bring back. I get the thought process and being the passing down back. Around 5K, there were just such stronger bets, in my opinion, at running back. I think on this build, I'd rather just see like Andre Ishivas here instead of like Brian Thomas Jr. or Quentin Johnson, and then just use the additional salary to make a stronger bet at running back. You've also got Kyron and Cup here as a player block. We've spoken about it earlier throughout this stream. I don't mind it. I just think it needs a cardinal for both Kyron and Cup, like hitting their ceiling with how concentrated Arizona is. I think I'd probably just prefer Connor or Dortch here instead of one of your running backs, or instead of Chase Brown, or Dortch instead of Brian Thomas or Quentin Johnson here. And then the Titans D obviously didn't work out, but I like them at home. It's a good way of accounting for the Breece Hall chalk kind of a lever that you're pulling there. So, Johnny, thank you for the submission this week. So the next roster comes from JJ Saxon. It is a Jared Goff skinny stack with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Millen. So generally with pocket passers like Jared Goff, if they are going to pay off their salary and have a had-to-have-it type score, Jared Goff, I think the Vegas prop for his rush yards was like literally like 0.5, like over would have been 1 yard. I generally prefer a double stack with pocket passers. So would love for you to incorporate another Lion into this build. The roster features Mason and Debo without a Viking, and Kyron and Cup without a Cardinal. So as we've spoken about, these player blocks, benefit from an opposing piece, and I'd rather see one here or one less for you to allow for that second line. I don't mind Schoonamaker or the Packers D as one-offs, but I think on a build like this, those roster spots I think would be better utilized in incorporating some correlation. Even if it's the 49ers D, if you're not including a single Viking. So thank you for the submission this week, JJ Saxon. So the next roster comes from Jerry Matt 88. This is a $50 single entry with 2,300 entrants. As you see, it is a Matt Stafford double stack with both Cup and Demarcus Robinson. Brought it back with James Conner. So I liked this start. It allowed you to get different, as most of the field or a majority of the field was playing Cup or Kyron, but very few were playing multiple pass catchers from the Rams. So I did really like that start. You've got a mini correlation with Gibbs and Mike Evans from the Tampa Bay Detroit game, which was a game environment we really liked this weekend. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Godwin both produced really strong games. So as you can see with the Gibbs and Evans pairing, directionally accurate, just didn't get the run out you were pulling for. The roster also features Brock Bowers and Justice Hill as a mini correlation. So I didn't mind betting on the Raiders to overachieve and Hill to kind of be more involved as the pass catching back. After Justice Hill saw, I think, 8 targets last week in a trailing game script, I could see the thought process here. I don't mind this bet. I will say I probably prefer a roster similar to this in a larger contest size, since you're already pretty unique with your Rams double stack to start. Strong correlation throughout. Despite its poor finish and scoring less than 100 points, I actually don't mind it. I think it could fare well to compete, at the top of the leaderboard had you gotten a different run out. So thank you for the submission, Jerry Matt. And so funny enough, actually, this weekend, Jerry, Matt, and I were actually able to get out and play some golf. This is a photo of us taken over the weekend. And Matt, aka Jerry Matt 88, someone I met through the Discord, reached out, and so just continue to be a great community here. OWS is really fantastic, and so just kind of wanted to share that story with y'all. So the next roster comes from OWS contributor GHeler. So this is a milli maker in the 555 contest with 6,000 entrants. You see that it is a game stack with the Vikings and 49ers. Vikings skinny stack with Darnold and Jefferson. You brought it back with Mason, Jordan Mason and Deebo Samuel. I really liked it. So you're incorporating two really popular plays in Mason and Deebo, but supplementing it with Darnold and Jefferson. I believe actually Inner Circle subscriber DGenair had a similar start in the build we reviewed earlier. Again, I liked this start. You've got J.K. Dobbins as a one-off at running back. We spoke about how we expected his role to grow based on how efficient he was last week. And again, this week he showed how much more was than Gus Edwards, producing 131 yards and a touchdown on 17 carries. So I really did like that. You've got Schoonamaker as a tight end, as a one-off. Like, again, as we've discussed, strong leverage off both Colby Parkinson at pay down tight end, who was much higher owned. And, also great leverage to Luke's teammate, CeeDee Lamb, who was highly owned as well. So just another lever you're pulling here. The touchdowns flow through the tight end position instead of Lamb on this build. So the roster also features Cooper Kupp as a one-off, again, in a great spot with the Rams down Puka Nacua. So I think personally I would have rather seen you pair him with McBride or Connor instead of Amari Cooper, and probably Connor if you're betting on the Cardinals defense on this build. So I think that would have been the one change I would have made. I would have moved Kupp up to the wide receiver slot and played Connor in the flex along with the Cardinals D. But thank you for the submission this week, GHeler. So the next roster is mine. It is a $50 single entry. As you see, it is a Baker Mayfield double stack with Godwin and McMillan. Again, we've talked about Baker Mayfield does have some rushing ability, but generally gains most of his points through his arm. No bring back on this build. So again, on teams like Detroit with several expensive options, I don't think a bring back is necessary, especially in a field contest like this. I think it was a 600 entrant tournament. I've got James Conner and Cooper Kupp here as mini correlations in a game environment I really liked. Obviously 60% of the field played Cooper Kupp. Build also features CeeDee Lamb and Taysom Hill. Again, another mini correlation in a game that I really liked. So that's kind of where my thought was with that. You've got Jordan Mason as the only one-off. Kind of really thought he was the best value at running back, expecting 20-plus opportunities at 50. In the field size like this, where you're dealing with hundreds of players and not thousands, I don't feel like you need to really worry about the ownership. A value like Jordan Mason is just a plug in and move on. And then Packers D at home, I felt like was a really strong option again, and gained some leverage off of the Indy chalk. And the next roster, funny enough, is actually just like a bonus build for this. And the only because Inner Circle member Johnny Blaze sent it to me for review. It was in the $150 3 max with 4,400 entrants. And why I found it to be very funny is I entered the exact same roster. I think in the $15 3 max. So just kind of wanted to include it. I give a little kind of feedback through it as we walk through. It's a Kyler Murray build with Trey McBride. Also includes both Cooper Kupp and Kyren Williams. That game environment. Then also has both correlation with Jordan Mason and Jordan Naylor, the two Jordans, as well as betting on that Tampa Bay Detroit game with Chris Godwin and Williams, and also has the Packers at D. We just talked about that. So, I think, sorry, Johnny, I appreciate the roster submission. It just made me laugh, which is why I was including it, since we independently came up with the same build. So again, I thought that was a really sharp build, but again, I'm a little biased. And so, thanks again for tuning in and for all the roster submissions. Another great week with over 40 submissions. So please don't get discouraged if I didn't get to yours this week. So as we talked about last year and last week, winning is just so hard. Things need to break your way. So along with encouraging the OWS fam to continue to stay disciplined and play within your bankroll, I also want to emphasize the importance of a condensed player pool. Try your best to avoid FOMO. So you're going to lose most weeks, but when you're right with your pool, try to give yourself a bunch of outs to the top, because that's where all the money is. So my advice will continue to build a tight player pool. Trust your research and your process. So I've included the top 5 for me this week, just for transparency, at quarterback, running back, tight end, and defense. As you will see, some high exposures, again, to all of the guys that I made my best bets on. And that's just how I like to play. So with that, I'll see you around the site and Discord throughout the week. And I hope to see you and your OWS avatar at the top of the leaderboard for week 3. Thanks again for tuning in and for your roster submissions. Catch you next week.